Well, let me welcome you to the conversation segment of the Signature Show this Sunday. Nigeria is having flood problems all over the place, and people are falling ill. We have been told about cholera outbreaks, corpses washed into our waterways. So there is a danger of certain waterborne diseases, both now and even when the floods recede. The House of Representatives has added a second alarm, if I will call it that Nigeria faces the risk of Ebola disease unless certain steps are taken. The NCDC has also told us that around East Africa, Uganda, that we should take a second look the way we go in and go out and be conscious of our health, the symptoms, look out for them. This afternoon, my guest is the Director General of Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Dr. Ifedayo. Now, Dr. Ifedayo, am I right to say that it's possible for us to have an uncommon outbreak of waterborne diseases after this, even in this flood and after it?
You're not wrong. Obviously, the consequence of the unfortunate situation citizens are experiencing in many parts of the country with flooding are both in terms of health and in terms of livelihood, in terms of lives that are lost. And there is the real worry. Once you contaminate water sources or you do not have a source for safe water to drink, then you're likely to drink contaminated water, and therefore there you have the risk of waterborne diseases. This is recognized as part of the response to flooding, with the looking after the internally displaced persons, provision of safe water. And we recognize that there might be, in recognition of this risk, that we need to perhaps start to take steps to prepare and to help prevent this as part of the acute response. I'm aware that NEMA has called meetings of agencies like ours that are involved in one form of public health emergency response or not. And actually on my calendar for tomorrow, I have a meeting with the Director General of NEMA to discuss this among other things, and see how we can get some synergies in preparedness and response, and to assist with easing the suffering of Nigerian citizens. But you are right, there's a clear and perhaps present danger, as they say, of waterborne diseases in the situation of the type of flooding that we have seen in different parts of the country. I think it's also important to mention that exactly the situation that we have with this flooding and cholera is actually what we have in other parts of the country that are experiencing cholera at the moment. There's no flooding, but with the advent of the rainy season and now rains everywhere, and because there's previously and there still continues to be indiscriminate defecation, the rainwater washes all of that into the water sources, contaminating them, and thereby people do not have safe source of water and end up drinking and using contaminated water, which then leads to cholera. What we now have in the situation of flooding is now multiply that by several factors if people stay in the flooded area. So it's part of why you need to move people away, and where they are, provide safe water, among other things, to relieve their suffering.
Let's still remain on this cholera for just a bit. Is there anything I can do to protect myself against that cholera?
Yes, there are things you can do, and we have released advisories and messages concerning that. Is, if you're not sure, for example, about the source of your water, boil your water before you drink it. Make sure that your food is properly cooked, cooked through and through before you do it. And then personal hygiene, you make sure you wash your hands as frequently as possible with, soap and water, or now that hand sanitizers are present, also do that. It's important that we are avoiding discriminate defecation, because your water source may be contaminated by your own physicists or physicists of members of your family. So these are some steps to take. Nigeria is not doing very well in terms of the practice of open defecation, and that really is an area that we need, the press and others to advocate for. And of course, we recognize that you then also have to answer the question: why are people defecating openly? If you ask them to stop, where do they go? So again, state governments, local governments need to, and working with all of the partners and support that they need. They need to work on investments in water, sanitation, and hygiene. So we provide water, provide safe disposal of sewage and other related things.
But is Nigeria at a risk of Ebola infection, Ebola disease?
Well, as you know, there is an ongoing outbreak in Uganda. This was announced by Ugandan colleagues. The WHO has confirmed also that there's an ongoing outbreak. And more recently, although this outbreak was in sort of the western part of the country, away from the capital, we've now had a case and a death in Kampala, the capital, which of course is close to the airport. So for this emerging and reimagine diseases, a case anywhere is a risk to the rest of the world. So Ebola is a risk to every part of Africa at the moment, given the way we travel. But we have also conducted our usual joint risk assessment, and of course, given travel, the fact that this pathogen does not have any sort of licensed treatments or vaccines, we've assessed that our risk of an Ebola case arriving by importation is high. And therefore, that has increased our level of alertness, and we have taken steps or are continuing to take steps to preferably prevent, but also to be prepared in the event that a case escapes and a case does arrive. We have diagnostic capacity, we always do, but we've made sure that there's both here and there's in Lagos, and have the capacity to expand to other labs as the case may be. We make sure we also have more than one diagnostic modality. So we have what is the regular PCR, but we also have cartridges for gene expert machines. If you remember, gene expert machines were first introduced into the country for diagnosis of TB and HIV. Then the platform worked for COVID, and of course now it is possible for that platform to work for Ebola. And we also have cartridges ready to deploy quickly in case you need to do that in places with gene expert platforms. At the moment, we are also, as usual, working with our colleagues in Port Health Authority services with the Federal Ministry of Health to identify passengers arriving from Uganda or having passed through Uganda, and following them up for the sort of expected 21 days to see if anybody develops symptoms. So compared to maybe respiratory conditions, or specifically if we say COVID, where it is possible to have infection without symptoms and transmit, Ebola is transmitted by people who are sick. Okay, so which is why we are following up people, knowing that the maximum sort of incubation period for Ebola is about 21 days. So if you don't have symptoms after 21 days, it's unlikely unless you have a more recent contact. And again, these are some benefits of the sort of the travel portal that we have now, which we hope to convert to what is a sort of health screening declaration form. Sometimes you feel that on paper in some countries, and that's essentially what that travel portal will be, to be less COVID related, hopefully, and more of a general health declaration form that allows us to keep tabs on people who may become symptomatic later of any infectious disease that may be a public health threat.
But Ifedayo, this organization, NCDC, was commended by the international community when you first handled the soya Ebola entry into Nigeria. High commendation. You had the manpower, you had the coordination, you were professional and effective. I hear that there has been so much of brain drain, a number of your doctors and other people of high qualification are leaving the country. If Ebola makes an incident in Nigeria now, are you in a position to replicate the wonderful performance you did in the first outbreak?
Well, as I said, we are preparing for the worst, but we hope for the best. That is, we don't actually get Ebola. But the point you make about brain drain is key, important. In the general population and general aspects of society, and not just the NCDC. I think what I can say is that, interestingly, the NCDC is managed till now. We still have a lot of the people who were around at Ebola. Some of them now are the senior people preparing to retire. Some of the younger people there now are the people waiting to succeed them. So we do have institutional memory for the people that were present during that outbreak, and those that actually even traveled to go and provide support to other countries. So, of course, we had a bit of attrition, a mix of even people we retire every day, and then some people have resigned for other reasons, including going to green pastures. But I think the summary is that we do have the capacity retained in the NCDC, and not even just the NCDC, even within the states. Our field epidemiologists are everywhere, and the state epidemiologists in many of the states, many of those states, especially Lagos, and Ogun State, that looked after these cases, still have their institutional memory, and a lot of the institutional memory and the experience from responding to Ebola has been built on, and also as a result of the need to respond to COVID. So we are not where we need to be, but we definitely are not where we were when Ebola first arrived. The response was very good, but I'm sure many of the people around will tell you that it was done very well against great odds, because it was the first time ever. But having seen Ebola, having seen monkeypox, we have a bit more experience with strange pathogens, and not be as terrifying or as unknown as it was in the previous outbreak.
The citizen, does he need to do anything to keep himself away from Ebola?
Well, there's not a lot that citizens can do, because you need to come in contact with a case, okay? And we do not have cases in the country at the moment, so we're at a prevent and then just prepare in case it happens. So I think in the past of citizens is that if you did travel to Uganda, or you pass through Uganda and you arrive in the country, please give your correct details. The details are not needed for anything other than to check on you whether you have symptoms or you take ill. If you fall into that category and you become unwell for any reason, doesn't matter what you think it is, develop a fever, you are feeling unwell, you are vomiting, and you pass through Uganda, the important thing is to present to hospital quickly, mention your travel history so that the appropriate tests can be done early to identify whether this is what you have or not. Because you also have to remember that the treatment for Ebola is only supportive. And we know that even though there's no definitive treatment for it, better outcomes are achieved if your supportive treatment is started early. So,
just one last word. How is use the word supportive? How well supported is NCDC by both federal and state governments, just to get it prepared in case there are developments like this that put pressure on you?
Well, the NCDC works and has to work closely with states. We are not an army. We cannot deploy across 36 states, and we depend on our colleagues and our partners in states, the ministries of health, the departments of public health, the state epidemiologists, the disease surveillance and notification officers, surveillance officers themselves. And it is a network of people who talk to themselves almost on a daily basis, who have WhatsApp groups, for whom we provide training and support when they require it, and whom we are not in a state of vacuum now that there's nothing happening. These guys are responding to all of the other concurrent challenges we have at the moment, and speaking to us and reporting to us on a daily basis about their experiences and what challenges they have. So this has been an immense resource for us, and we would not be able to do all of the stuff that we do without the cooperation of all of our colleagues in the state. So I mean, if you permit me, I'd like to recognize all of our colleagues on the front lines who actually do face these dangers that that they have to in the course of their work to preserve our health, protect our health, and preserve our security. As an agency of government of the Federal Ministry of Health, of course, we receive support from our parent ministry and from the government as a whole in the funding that we have. In fact, in the recognition of the need of this agency that led to actually the acts that established it formally. And one can report that the records available to me since I took over show that government funding has increased every year for the agency. Okay, and it's not just increased every year for the agency, it's also been backed by nearly 100% release every year. It is a journey. We know that the resources are finite. They are not, you don't always get everything that you want. There's a lot of resources that are required for us to do what we need to be doing, including the implementation of the National Action Plan on health security. So, of course, we appeal for continued support from government. We've had visits by our oversight committees in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, who continue to reassure us of their support, who continue to keep an eye on us to make sure that we are performing and using the resources available to the extent that we can. Also, with a view of identifying what challenges we have that perhaps they may help us overcome during this budgetary cycle as well. And we have a lot of partners who provide a lot of technical support, a lot of support in kind as well, that make us actually punch well above our weight in terms of whether it's the age of the agency or in terms of the actual resources that we have. And I think that I do not see any reason why that pattern will not continue, because if there's one thing that has happened in the last couple of years, it's that citizens, government, everybody recognize health security now, and they need to have somebody who is working in the background, whether you can see them or not, to look after that.
Ifedayo, can I feel safe now?
I think you are safe, but keeping yourself safe, keeping your family safe, keeping Nigerians safe, maintaining our public health is not just the NCDC's responsibility. It's an all of the population, all of the community responsibility. If you see anything that looks out of place, please report it. We have hotlines that can be called for free. We have social media platforms that you can post messages, and typically we will investigate them. Our Connect Center reports the number of calls they receive, what the topics are, and we have an public health intelligence meeting every day where we look at all the signals with a view of identifying where the next danger may be arising. So we'll continue to push to play our part in assuring everybody's health. We hope that we'll receive cooperation of you and other citizens to do that, because without your cooperation, really, there's nothing we can do.
Thank you very much for coming to the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
In the past 30 minutes or thereabout, I've been trying to find out whether I'm safe, whether you are safe. With the flood, with the alarm over Ebola, are we safe? We've heard from the horse. Yes, we are safe. The conversation never ends. It continues every Sunday. My name remains Mwabuzi Njoko. Good afternoon.